House hacking and how you can get it done. Let's talk about what it looks like to house hack, use your primary residence to get started in real estate investing. The fundamentals of investing. So let's leverage your primary residence from either leveraging the primary residence, turning it into a rental, leveraging the home equity in your primary residence. There's so many different options that you can do. So let's get into what they might look like for you. First, why using your primary residence is a smart idea. Just like in the real estate side, low inventory, high demand. Right now, we are seeing not a lot of properties on the market for rental. So the demand is high. Even in our property management side, we're seeing an over 75% lease renewal rating. Our tenants aren't moving, which means we have less inventory to provide for other tenants trying to move. So there's a low inventory, rental prices are going up. Rising property values. If you're able to keep that property, have a tenant in there, and pay your mortgage, and you're also getting more appreciation and equity build up in the property, that's more money that you'll be able to pull out long term in order to reinvest it in something else. Low interest rates. Let's talk about that. If you bought a property and you're living in this property right now and you're at a 2, 3, 4, 5% interest rate, compared to what the interest rates are right now, that property is gold. You don't want to get rid of that. If you can keep that property, have a tenant pay the mortgage through their rent, gain equity in the property, it's smart to keep the property. If you're in a great job market area, the tax perks that come with owning an investment property, the low vacancy rate right now, properties are being snatched up. So as long as the property is being well maintained, tenants are staying in the property. And then if you can find a good deal on purchasing your next home, it makes sense to keep this one as your current one as an investment property. But there are some opportunities and situations where you want to sell the property and not keep it. The biggest would be if you have a property that's older that needs a lot of updating, farmhouses, older homes with old windows, lead-based paint type properties that need a ton of work in order to even get it ready. Those types of situations might be more beneficial for you to sell versus rent. But even if you've got an older property, but it's been well maintained, it's still in contending for an investment property. We have several properties in our area that are older, that are very well maintained, that tenants love being in. It shows character. We have to make sure they've got the lead-based paint addendums and all of those things. So it is a couple extra steps. But there's not many houses that are still on the market with that character that you have of old homes. So as long as it's been maintained, you could still rent it, but maybe sell it if it's going to need a lot more work or a tenant is going to complain about a lot of things that need to be done. And then the variation on loans. So when you're doing an investor loan, the interest rate is going to be higher than what you could get for a regular primary residence loan. Your down payment. You can get an FHA or conventional 2.5%, 5%, 10%. If you're a veteran, you can get a VA loan for 0%. There's a lot of different options that you can do when you're buying a primary residence. So if you kept your property, turned it into a rental, and then used your money to buy your next primary residence, as opposed to saving all your money, keeping your current property to live in, and then using the money for your first investment, this is the differences. So your down payment on an investment, you're looking at minimum 20%. The difference between a 0, 2.5%, 5%, 10% on a primary residence. The loan type that you could get. On a primary residence, you can go FHA, VA, USDA, conventional. There's so many different options. But on investor loans, there's only a few options, and most of them all require at least 20% down. The qualifying criteria on primary loans, while it's not completely as lenient as it had been with no-doc loans and things like that in the past, it is a lot easier to get a primary mortgage than it is to get an investment loan. An investment loan is considered a riskier loan because if all else fails, the banks know that you're going to do everything you can to keep your primary residence as the place for you to live. And they know that if anything is going to be missed payment-wise, it will be a second or an investment property. And then mortgage insurance. On a primary residence, depending on how much money you're putting down, you could have mortgage insurance. But the benefit of that potentially is that you can still get into that property with a little amount of money down versus and pay a monthly mortgage insurance versus having to come up with so much money initially. Coming up with all that money initially on an investment loan keeps you from having to pay mortgage insurance on an investment property. And then let's talk about the leverage of what it looks like to invest in real estate. So we've got $50,000. If you're going to invest that into the stock market, you're going to be investing $50,000. However, if you're going to invest it as a 401k, and let's say you get matched 100% of what you're doing, you could end up with $100,000. However, if you're investing in real estate and you put that $50,000 into buying a property, you could end up with a $500,000 property. Look at the difference and how much leverage owning an investment property is versus putting your money into the stock market or your 401k. And I'm not saying to have none of these. I'm saying it is a very good idea to diversify and make sure you have the proper amount of funds invested into real estate to make sure that you're leveraging the amount of money that you're putting in. And then variations on using your primary house. You can do so many different things. Like if you're a younger adult, and these are just scenarios, so this could apply to anyone. But for example, I will use myself as an example through all of these because I've done all of them. When I was just getting started, I had several friends still from college. So when I bought a property, I'd have one or two of my friends rent out a room. This was cheaper for them than getting another property for them to rent. What they were paying me was covering my mortgage, so I was making money and I was the one owning a property. So consider that for the people who have kids in school, in college somewhere, or college grads who are looking to live and begin work. Buy a property and then have your friends live in it, or parents buy a property near the school, have their friends live there. What you'd be paying in room and board will far exceed what you'd be paying on this property, and then you've got an investment. Second option, rent out a separate unit. I think it was my second property that I owned. I had a larger house I had bought as a foreclosure. I did a ton of cosmetic work to it, but everything else was ready to go. I had a basement that I turned into, in essence, an in-law apartment, and I had a friend rent out that space. She basically had an entire basement apartment, her own entrance, her own bathroom, her own kitchen, her own living room. So she didn't even need to come upstairs at all. And I was able to charge a lot more for that than if I were just renting out a room where the bathroom, the kitchen, the living area would all be shared spaces at that point. And then convert your primary into a rental. This is what I was just talking about. And this is what I did for the first several homes that I bought. I lived in for a couple years and then I turned them into an investment property and a rental. And instead of buying an investment property, my next purchase was another primary. So I was able to buy the first property, 2.5% down, 5%, whatever it was at the time, with a primary interest rate and primary down payment, live in there for a few years. And then when I was ready to move out, I bought the next primary, which I got at another 2.5% with another primary interest rate, both of which avoided having to pay investor fees, 20% down, the interest that goes with an investor loan. And it allowed me to get into these properties at a much lower cost. And then owning multi-unit and living in one. You could do this by a duplex. You could do this by living or having a 4-unit, a 5-unit, whatever that looks like. But if you're able to live in part of it and then rent out the others, you're able to make money, live there, and benefit from both avenues. The big difference, though, is the mindset shift that you need to have from what was your primary house, what you were living in, to the mindset of it now being an investment property. So for me, the very first time I did this, it was hard because the very first house I bought was the house that I brought my son home in. There were a lot of memories. There were things that when I looked around, I would smile and see the different memories in my mind of what took place in that specific room. I also like to keep my house a certain way. And I'm not saying the tenants damaged my house, but their wear and tear versus my wear and tear was a lot different. So when I walked into the property for the first time after a tenant moved out, I was very upset. But it's one of those things that is just a mindset shift, understanding that it is no longer your home. It is a product on the market that tenants are now living in. It's an investment. So if you can understand that and take away that emotional attachment, understand the perspective on expenses and what that looks like, time horizon, the utilitarian view on space, all of these things are making you money. So as long as you can withdraw the emotional attachment, and for me, for a little while, that was hard to do. I wound up getting my property management staff involved, and they were the ones who went, toured the property, did all of the things. So every time a tenant moved out, I didn't have to. At this point, I'm good, but if you know that there's going to be an issue as far as that goes, hire out a company so you don't have to be involved. Get a third party to do it for you. Leveraging real estate professionals. This is always important, and no matter what you're doing. But to understand the expertise, professionalism, market analysis, legal compliance, tenant screening, time savings, the vendor savings, expert advice and guidance, all of these things real estate professionals provide, whether it's a realtor helping you figure out what your next property is going to be, property manager who's going to help you figure out what you can market your rent for on the property you're going to use as an investment, how to screen tenants, what the laws are when it comes to tenant landlord, all of the things, all the way down to a mortgage lender, title company. Finding the real estate professionals who understand the specifics that you're going through and what you're looking to do are key to help create a smooth transition for you. So that's all I have in regards to unlocking your potential for real estate investment through your personal property. I've done it several times. That's how I got started in real estate investing, even when I didn't think that was going to happen. So what I did is I started out buying my primary residence, stayed there for 2 years, decided it was time for me to move, kept the property, bought my next one. Now I've got 2 properties, one I'm living in and one is a primary. After a couple years, I decided I wanted to move again. Now I have 2 investment properties. I'm now moving into another primary. And the great thing about that is it started me off on a small scale. It allowed me to get my feet wet in real estate investing without having to spend so much money, without having to feel like I needed to pull the trigger on something that I was unsure of, because I'm finding so many people want to invest in real estate. The problem is most of them have the money. Most of them even understand what it looks like, but it's getting over that hump, that initial fear that they can't get past, and they don't know why. This option, being able to leverage your primary residence, whether it's renting out a room, renting out a basement or an apartment above a garage, using your primary when you're ready to move, house hacking and being able to have duplex or some sort of multi-unit where you're also being able to live in one and use multiple streams of income after that. There's so many different options. And we can talk also about what it looks like in order to use your primary residence to pull out a loan, a HELOC, a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit. All of those things can still be done if you don't want to use any of these house hacking methods. You can still use your primary residence and the funds that you have appreciated through equity in order to buy your next investment property or your first one. But take that step, understand what it looks like, understand the ins and outs, how it applies to you. And don't forget to just make the move.